Message received. We're on our way to help.
Welcome to this deep exploration of one of the most fascinating subjects in contemporary consciousness studies and UFO research, the YahYel civilization. Over the next portion of this presentation, we're going to journey into a realm where science fiction meets spiritual discourse, where ancient myths about star beings collide with modern reports of triangular UFOs, and where questions about humanity's place in the cosmos become intensely personal. The YahYel, also known as the Shalanaya or YahYel, represent something extraordinary in the landscape of channeled extraterrestrial contact. They're described as a hybrid civilization, created through the deliberate blending of human and gray extraterrestrial genetics, who may become the first non-terrestrial species to establish open, public contact with humanity. According to multiple independent channelers across different continents, predictions placed this contact somewhere between 2025 and 2033. We are now in 2026, and according to more recent channeled material from Bashar, official first contact in the United States may occur as early as 2027. Though we must note that many indigenous communities worldwide have maintained sporadic contact with alien intelligences for centuries. We'll explore that timeline more deeply in another video. But for now, know that the phenomenon of first contact applies primarily to mainstream, governmental acknowledgement, rather than the isolated interactions that have occurred throughout human history. Before we dive into the specifics of who the YahYel are, their appearance, culture, and mission, I want to establish something important. Everything we're about to discuss comes from channeled sources and unverified testimony. This isn't peer-reviewed science in the traditional sense. What we're examining is a cultural and spiritual phenomenon, a set of narratives that thousands of people find meaningful, that shape how certain communities think about consciousness, evolution, and humanity's cosmic future. Whether you approach this material as literal truth, metaphorical wisdom, or simply fascinating mythology, there's value in understanding what people are saying about these alleged beings and why these narratives resonate so deeply. Part 1. Understanding the names and their meanings. Let's begin with something fundamental. The names themselves, because in many spiritual and indigenous traditions, names carry profound meaning and power. The primary name we'll be using is YahYel, though you may also encounter other spellings. According to channeled information, particularly from sources connected to the Essassani civilization, channeled through Daryl Anka's work with Bashar, the name YahYel can be translated to mean lovers of God, or those who are connected to God, or connected to Source. This immediately tells us something about how these beings are characterized. They're described as fundamentally spiritual entities, deeply connected to what various traditions might call Source, the divine, universal consciousness, or God. But they have another name equally significant, Shal-Anaya, or Shal-Inaya. This name, according to the channeled material, was actually bestowed upon them by the Essassani civilization, another hybrid race we'll discuss shortly. Shalanaya translates to those who come first, or those who will come first, directly referencing the YahYel's anticipated role as the first hybrid extraterrestrial civilization to make open, public contact with humanity. Consider what this designation implies. In a cosmos populated by numerous intelligent species, in a galactic community that allegedly includes dozens or hundreds of civilizations. The YahYel have been given the specific honor and responsibility of being Earth's first official contact. According to the narrative, there are specific reasons why the YahYel, rather than the Essassani, Pleiadians, Arcturians, or any other group, would serve in this capacity. And honestly, if you were going to pick an advanced civilization to show up first on the White House lawn, you'd probably also go with the ones who look mostly human, rather than, say, the insectoid mantis beings, or the little gray guys with the huge black eyes. Smart strategy, right? The multiplicity of names also reflects the multifaceted nature of how these beings understand themselves. Just as humans might be known by personal names, family names, national identities, and professional titles, the YahYel apparently understand themselves through multiple lenses: their spiritual essence, YahYel, connected to Source, and their cosmic role, Shalanaya, the bridge builders, the first contact ambassadors. Part 2. The Hybrid Program and the 5 Races. To understand the YahYel, we need to understand the larger context they exist within, what channeled sources call the hybrid program. This is one of the most complex and fascinating aspects of contemporary UFO lore and channeled material. According to sources like Bashar, channeled through Daryl Anka, who claims to be an Essassani being from approximately 300 years in humanity's future, there exists a deliberate program of genetic hybridization involving human DNA and DNA from various extraterrestrial species, primarily what are commonly known as the Greys. This program has allegedly created 5 primary hybrid races, though there are references to as many as 30 total hybrid civilizations that have emerged from this process. The first hybrid race remains largely undisclosed in public channeled material. What we do know is that this race resembles the Greys most closely and humans least. They're described as having a singular or hive-like consciousness, similar to how bees or ants operate as a collective organism. This makes sense when you consider they're the earliest iteration in the hybridization sequence, closest to the gray source material, furthest from human individuality. The second hybrid race is also not extensively discussed in publicly available material, though there are symbolic representations associated with them in various channeled sessions. Apparently, not everything gets disclosed all at once. There's a phased approach to this whole cosmic reveal, which, if you think about it, makes sense. You don't drop the entire galactic encyclopedia on humanity in one go. That's how you break people's brains. The third hybrid race is the Essassani, also called the Eshakani, since around 2013, due to what's described as a shift in their vibrational frequency. The name Essassani means place of living light. These are the beings that Bashar represents, and they've become quite central to contemporary channeled discourse. The Essassani are described as small in stature, about 5 feet tall, with large eyes, pale or whitish complexions, and features that blend human and gray characteristics. They're said to exist in what's termed fifth density reality, meaning they've transcended many of the limitations of third density physical existence that humans currently experience. The Essassani have some fascinating characteristics according to the channeled material. They're telepathic and no longer use verbal speech. They don't eat, drink, or eliminate waste as we do. They reproduce not through physical intercourse, but through a conscious energy process involving both male and female participants. Their timeline is operating 10 times faster than ours. and they organize their entire civilization around what they call following your highest excitement, which is their primary operating principle. Imagine a civilization where nobody ever has to drag themselves to a job they hate on Monday morning, where follow your bliss isn't a bumper sticker, but actual public policy. Sounds pretty good, doesn't it? The fourth hybrid race is intriguing because, while acknowledged, it hasn't been fully introduced in public-channeled material. Bashar has indicated that there are reasons for this phased disclosure. Not all information is meant to be shared simultaneously. What we do know is that this fourth race serves in some capacity as guides and guardians, particularly for human hybrid children who are allegedly being raised in these extraterrestrial environments. They're described as being able to interface more easily with human three-dimensional reality, and may even spend extended periods on Earth in ways that allow them to blend in or operate without detection. So if you ever encounter someone who seems a bit too perfect, too calm, too unnaturally centered, well, maybe they're just really into yoga. Or maybe they're a fourth density hybrid. Who's to say? And this brings us to the fifth hybrid race, the YahYel. The YahYel are described as the hybrid race that looks most like humans. Where the first hybrid race looks most like greys, the YahYel have cycled back around in the hybridization sequence to become strikingly human-like in appearance. This design is intentional. The YahYel are meant to serve as a bridge between humanity and the broader galactic community, precisely because their appearance won't immediately trigger fear or the alien reaction that might arise from encountering beings that look radically different from us. But why does this hybrid program exist at all? What's the purpose? Well, buckle up, because we're about to dive into one of the more sobering backstories in this whole narrative. Part 3. The Gray Extinction Crisis and the Gift of Hybridization. According to the channeled narrative, the hybrid program wasn't a scientific experiment or an act of cosmic curiosity. It was born from necessity, specifically from an existential crisis facing the Gray civilizations. The Greys, despite their advanced technology and intelligence, made a series of catastrophic choices in their evolutionary past. In their pursuit of intellectual and technological perfection, they overemphasized mental development at the expense of emotional capacity. They genetically modified themselves over countless generations, removing what they perceived as inefficient or problematic traits. Strong emotions, individual ego, physical reproduction, all that messy biological stuff. The outcome was a civilization that had become incredibly advanced intellectually and technologically, but had lost something essential: the ability to reproduce naturally, to feel deep emotions, to maintain genetic diversity. They had essentially engineered themselves into an evolutionary dead end. Without intervention, the Gray civilizations faced extinction. It turns out you can be too smart for your own good. Who knew? Parallel realities come into play in the narrative. The Greys, having developed technology to perceive and interact with parallel versions of Earth across multiple timelines, discovered that they weren't unique in their predicament. They found that many parallel Earths were following similar trajectories, civilizations that prioritized technology and intellect over emotion and connection, that were heading toward their own forms of self-destruction, whether through nuclear war, environmental collapse, or genetic degradation. Looking at the current state of our world, You can see why this might concern them. We're speedrunning toward several different apocalypse scenarios simultaneously, which takes a special kind of talent. In recognizing this pattern, the Greys saw an opportunity for mutual salvation. If they could access human DNA from timelines where humanity still maintained its full emotional capacity, genetic diversity, and reproductive vitality, they could create hybrid species that would embody the best of both lineages: Grey intelligence and human emotion, Grey technology and human creativity, Grey longevity and human adaptability. But this wasn't meant to be a one-way extraction. The hybrid program, according to the narrative, is framed as a gift, a way for the Greys to give back to the parallel Earths by creating evolved versions of humanity that could serve as guides and teachers. These hybrid races would help their human cousins avoid the same evolutionary mistakes, would demonstrate how to balance technology with spirituality, intellect with emotion, individual growth with collective harmony. The Pleiadians enter the story at this point. While the Greys provided the intellectual and genetic framework, they recognized they needed help with the emotional and spiritual dimensions of this project. The Pleiadians, described in channeled material as a highly evolved, human-like civilization, known for their wisdom, compassion, and energetic healing abilities, agreed to provide what you might call energetic support or vibrational harmonization to the hybridization process. If the Greys contributed the blueprint and the scaffolding, and humans contributed the raw emotional vitality, the Pleiadians contributed the architecture that would allow these different elements to integrate harmoniously rather than creating fractured, dysfunctional beings. The 5 hybrid races, each representing different points along a spectrum from Grey to human, each with their own gifts and purposes, each designed to interface with humanity at different stages of our awakening to our cosmic heritage. And the YahYel, as the 5th and most human-like of these hybrids, were designed specifically to be accessible to us, to feel familiar enough to be welcomed, but different enough to expand our understanding of what's possible. Part 4. Physical appearance and presence. So what do the YahYel actually look like? Let's paint a picture. The YahYel are described as having refined, elegant facial features that would generally read as attractive by human standards, but with certain qualities that mark them as not quite human. Their eyes are larger than typical human eyes, not enormously so like the classic Grey aliens, but noticeably larger and more expressive. These eyes are often described as carrying a quality of depth, wisdom, and gentleness that seems to communicate volumes without words. You know how sometimes you meet someone and their eyes just seem to look right through you, in a way that's somehow both disconcerting and comforting? Apparently, that's the YahYel vibe, but dialed up to 11. Their skin is characterized as soft, smooth, and pale, often with descriptions ranging from alabaster white to light beige, or even having a subtle golden tone. Some channeled sources mention that YahYel skin has a quality of luminosity or radiance to it, as though they're emanating a subtle glow. This isn't like bioluminescence in the sense of glowing in the dark, but rather a vitality and health that seems to make their skin appear more alive and energized than typical human skin. Basically, they've achieved what every skincare commercial promises, but can never quite deliver. Their bodies are generally described as slender and graceful, with proportions that are similar to, but slightly different from human proportions. They're not frail or weak-looking, despite being slender. Rather, they give an impression of elegant efficiency, as though every aspect of their physical form has been optimized for both aesthetic beauty and functional capability. One of the most striking aspects mentioned by channelers like Syl Goodhart, who channels an entity named Yalana, is the energetic presence of the YahYel. Multiple sources describe being in the presence of a YahYel as feeling immediately peaceful, uplifted, and somehow recognized. There's a quality to their energy field, what some might call their aura or biofield, that reportedly extends quite far from their physical body and can be felt by sensitive humans even at considerable distances. This energetic signature is described as warm, loving, and profoundly compassionate, but not in an overwhelming or saccharine way. Rather, witnesses describe the feeling you might get from being around someone who is completely comfortable in their own skin, who operates from a place of inner peace and genuine care for others, who doesn't judge or project negativity. The kind of presence that makes you feel safe to be authentically yourself. You know, the exact opposite of how most people feel at family gatherings during the holidays. Several channeled sources note that if you encountered a YahYel walking down a city street, you might not immediately think alien, but you would definitely notice them. You'd probably turn to look twice. You might think they were some kind of unusually attractive person, maybe a model, or someone who radiates health and vitality in an uncommon way. But the more you looked, the more you'd notice the subtle differences. The eyes a bit too large, the skin perhaps too perfect, the overall presence too magnetic to be ordinary. This strategic ambiguity in their appearance is apparently intentional. The YahYel need to be close enough to human to not trigger immediate fear or rejection, but distinct enough that when they do make contact, there's no mistaking that you're encountering something beyond ordinary human experience. Interestingly, according to channeled information, the YahYel can speak verbally when needed, though telepathy is their natural mode of communication. They will wear clothing when interacting with other beings who expect such conventions, but among themselves, they typically remain unclothed, viewing the body as natural and without the shame or taboo associations that many human cultures have developed around nudity. Which brings up an interesting point about cultural differences. From the YahYel perspective, humans have some genuinely baffling customs. According to Bashar, the YahYel are endlessly curious about why we do certain things. For instance, we buy food that comes in perfectly good boxes. Then we take the food out of those boxes and put them on plates to eat. Then we need a place to store these plates, so we buy houses to keep them in and furniture to place them on. Why not just eat out of the box? It's already a perfectly functional container. But no, we need the plate and the table and the house, and probably a dishwasher too, because heaven forbid we wash the plate by hand. Or consider this. We have hot water coming directly out of taps in our homes, but when we want to make tea, boil cold water. As Douglas Adams pointed out in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, why do we need the kettle at all? Just use the hot water from the tap. But humans insist on the ritual, the specific temperature, the particular method. The YahYel find this simultaneously fascinating and bewildering. They're also curious about our relationship with time. We invented devices to measure it precisely, And then we invented being late. We created schedules, and then immediately began complaining about them. We say we don't have enough time while simultaneously spending hours watching other people's lives on screens. It's all rather contradictory. And don't even get them started on money. We invented a symbolic system to represent value, then got so caught up in accumulating the symbols that we forgot about the actual things of value they were meant to represent. People hoard pieces of paper or digital numbers, while the planet that provides everything we actually need to survive is deteriorating. From an outside perspective, it's like watching someone on a sinking ship rearrange the furniture. Perplexing. But the YahYel aren't judging these human quirks. They're genuinely curious and loving in their observation. They see these behaviors as part of what makes humanity unique, part of our creative, emotional, sometimes chaotic nature that they actually admire and want to understand better. After all, they were created partly from us, and understanding human behavior helps them understand themselves. Part 5. Lifestyle, Habitats, and the Scout Ships. Despite being described as deeply connected to nature and embodying principles of harmony with natural systems, the YahYel don't actually live on planetary surfaces. Instead, they live aboard massive, sophisticated spacecraft that function as mobile biospheres. This might seem contradictory at first. How can beings so connected to nature live in space? But the channeled material explains that for the YahYel, this represents a philosophical shift in understanding what nature means. For them, harmony with nature isn't about location, but about consciousness and principle. You can be on a planet and live in complete disharmony with natural systems. Looking at you, most of modern industrial civilization, or you can be aboard a spacecraft and maintain perfect alignment with natural principles of balance, cycle, and flow. These YahYel ships are described not as cold, mechanical environments, but as living ecosystems. Imagine a massive vessel, potentially miles in length, with interior spaces that include gardens, forests, flowing water features, and areas that simulate natural sunlight. The ships maintain atmospheric conditions, gravitational fields, and environmental cycles that support both the YahYel themselves and various plant and even animal species they cultivate aboard. The technology and the natural elements aren't seen as separate or opposed but integrated. The ship's systems work in harmony with biological processes. Water cycles through the ship the way it cycles through a planetary ecosystem. Plants and microorganisms play functional roles in air purification and nutrient cycling. The line between artificial and natural becomes blurred because the YahYel don't recognize such distinctions as meaningful. They've essentially turned their spacecraft into flying gardens. It's like someone looked at the biodome experiments here on Earth and said, "That's cute, but what if we made it work and also made it fly through space?" This mobile existence also serves practical purposes. As a civilization engaged in contact and bridge-building activities with multiple worlds, the YahYel need to be mobile. They can position their vessels near planets they're working with, can respond to needs across wide areas of space, and can evacuate quickly if necessary. They're not bound to defending a single world or vulnerable to the kinds of planetary catastrophes that could wipe out a surface-dwelling civilization. It's the ultimate insurance policy against asteroid impacts, supervolcano eruptions, or your sun deciding to go through an unexpected phase. Just pack up the ship and move. But perhaps the most well-known aspect of YahYel technology, and the reason many UFO researchers believe they've already encountered evidence of the YahYel, is their smaller scout craft, which are distinctly triangular in shape. These are the ships that have been showing up in our skies for decades, silently drifting overhead, making themselves just visible enough to plant seeds of wonder and possibility in human consciousness. Part 6. Triangular UFOs and Historical Sightings. If the YahYel have indeed been visiting Earth and making their presence gradually known, then we should expect to see reports of their characteristic triangular spacecraft. And indeed, two of the most well-documented mass UFO sightings in modern history involved large triangular craft. The Belgian UFO wave of 1989 to 1990 and the Phoenix Lights event of 1997. Let's start with the Phoenix Lights, which channeled sources specifically attribute to the YahYel. On the evening of March 13, 1997, thousands of people across the state of Arizona witnessed something extraordinary. The primary sighting involved a massive V-shaped or triangular formation of lights that traveled silently across the sky from approximately 7:30 p.m. to 10:30 p.m. The formation was witnessed from Henderson, Nevada, through Prescott, across the entire Phoenix metropolitan area, down to Tucson, and eventually into Mexico, a path covering hundreds of miles. Witnesses described the formation as consisting of 5 to 7 individual lights arranged in a perfect V or triangular pattern, moving slowly and deliberately across the sky. What made this sighting so extraordinary was the sheer size of what people reported seeing. Multiple witnesses, including a psychiatrist named Dr. Lynn Kitey, who would go on to dedicate much of her life to researching the event, described not merely lights, but a massive structured craft that the lights were attached to. Many witnesses reported that as this formation passed overhead, it actually blocked out the stars behind it, revealing a solid, dark, triangular structure that some estimated to be as much as a mile wide. The craft moved silently. No sound of jet engines, no sonic boom, only eerie, perfect silence as it drifted majestically across the Arizona sky. A mile-wide craft that makes no sound. That's either extremely advanced technology or the universe's most impressive stealth bomber. Given that our military still can't make a helicopter quiet enough not to wake up the neighbors, I'm leaning towards the former. Then Governor Fife Symington III initially held a mocking press conference where his chief of staff dressed up in an alien costume, treating the event as a joke. However, 10 years later in 2007, Symington would confess that he had actually witnessed the craft himself that night and described it as otherworldly and unlike any aircraft he'd ever seen in his experience as a pilot. So there's a lesson there about maybe not mocking things before you've properly investigated them. But hey, at least he eventually came clean. The official explanation from the U.S. Air Force was that the lights were illumination flares dropped by a 10 aircraft during a training exercise at the Barry Goldwater Range. However, this explanation reveals a deeper confusion that has plagued understanding of the Phoenix Lights for decades. What actually makes the Phoenix Lights so complex? There were actually 3 separate phenomena happening that night, but only 2 were recorded. And those 2 recordings have been mistakenly used to explain or debunk the third, most significant event. The first phenomenon: military flares. The military explanation is partially correct. There were indeed flares dropped during training exercises that evening. Video recordings do show lights that appear in the sky and then disappear. However, careful analysis reveals something the casual observer might miss. When you superimpose a daylight photograph of the Sierra Estrella mountain range over the nighttime video footage, you can clearly see that these lights are actually falling behind the mountains, slowly descending with parachutes as flares do. They're not hovering or slowly disappearing in the sky, as some interpretations suggest. They're literally dropping behind the mountain ridge line. This can be demonstrated with simple photographic overlay techniques, and it definitively identifies this particular recording as showing military flares. The second phenomenon, aircraft formation. The second recorded event shows what appears to be a triangular formation of lights moving across the sky. However, in this footage, you can actually see one of the lights move out of alignment with the others, a clear indication that these are separate aircraft flying in formation, not lights attached to a single massive craft. This matches the profile of the A-10 Thunderbolt formations that were indeed operating from nearby Davis-Monthan Air Force Base that night. Aircraft flying in formation will occasionally have one aircraft adjust its position slightly, which is exactly what this recording shows. The third phenomenon, the YahYel craft. But the most significant event of March 13, 1997, the one that thousands of witnesses describe with remarkable consistency, was never recorded on video at all. What witnesses describe is a massive, solid, dark triangular structure. Some estimated it as a mile or more in width, that moved slowly and silently across the sky. What makes this different from the recordings is that this craft was visible primarily because it blocked out the stars behind it. As it passed overhead, witnesses saw an enormous dark shape defined only by the absence of starlight, with the bright lights at its corners and edges merely highlighting this vast darkness. This is why no clear video exists of this main event. The craft was only properly visible if you were positioned directly underneath it, looking up at the night sky, and could perceive the stars being blocked out. Someone filming from the side or from a distance, or without being specifically positioned beneath the craft's path, would either capture nothing at all or would only see lights that could be interpreted as the flares or formation flying. This recording gap has allowed skeptics and believers to talk past each other for nearly 3 decades. Skeptics point to the 2 existing recordings and say flares and aircraft formations. Believers point to thousands of consistent witness testimonies and say what we saw was something completely different, something massive and structured that the recordings simply don't capture. And they're both right about what they're looking at. They're just looking at different things. According to channeled material from Ishua and other YahYel representatives, this was the actual YahYel craft, their massive mothership, or a large scout vessel, conducting a deliberate flyover. The confusion created by the 3 separate phenomena occurring on the same night actually serves their gradual disclosure strategy perfectly. It provides plausible deniability for those who aren't ready to accept the reality of visitation, while giving those who experienced it directly an undeniable personal encounter. Clever, right? They show themselves to thousands, but in a way that maintains just enough ambiguity that society doesn't completely freak out. That's some sophisticated psychological operations right there. Over 10,000 people witnessed this event firsthand. the mass consciousness of Arizona was forever changed that night. People who had never thought seriously about UFOs suddenly had an experience they couldn't explain away. Families standing in their yards, pointing up at a craft that defied explanation. This is exactly the kind of gradual, non-threatening introduction that the YahYel strategy apparently involves. According to channeled material, specifically from Sean Swanson's channeling of Ishua, a YahYel representative, the Phoenix Lights were indeed a deliberate YahYel flyover. It was meant to be seen. It was meant to be documented. The YahYel chose March 13, 1997, to make one of their most visible appearances, to begin planting seeds in human consciousness that we are not alone, that we are being visited by beings who do not wish to hide, but who must move gradually to avoid causing panic or social disruption. Now let's travel back a few years earlier and across the Atlantic to the Belgian UFO wave of 1989 to 1990. Starting on November 29, 1989, in the Belgian town of Eupen near the German border, police officers and civilians began reporting sightings of large, dark, triangular craft with bright lights at each corner and a red or amber pulsing light in the center. These weren't brief glimpses. Witnesses described prolonged sightings where the craft hovered at low altitudes, sometimes above treetop level, moving slowly and silently before accelerating away at impossible speeds. When I say impossible speeds, I mean the kind of acceleration that would turn a human pilot into a pancake. Yet these things were pulling it off like it was nothing. What makes the Belgian wave particularly credible is the response of the Belgian government and military. Unlike most countries that either ignore or dismiss UFO reports, the Belgian Air Force took the sightings seriously and publicly collaborated with civilian researchers, specifically with an organization called SOBEPS, the Belgian Society for the Study of Space Phenomena. Imagine that. A government actually investigating strange phenomena instead of just issuing a blanket denial and hoping everyone forgets about it. Revolutionary concept. On the night of March 30th to 31st, 1990, the situation escalated dramatically. Multiple radar stations detected an unknown object over Belgium. 2 Belgian Air Force F-16 fighter jets were scrambled to intercept. Both ground radar and the F-16's onboard radar systems tracked objects that displayed flight characteristics that defied known physics, accelerating from 280 kilometers per hour to over 1,800 kilometers per hour in seconds, making impossibly sharp turns, dropping from high altitude to ground level in moments, all without producing any sonic boom or visible means of propulsion. The pilots never got a visual confirmation, but the radar data was unambiguous. Something was there. Something was real, and it was performing maneuvers that no known aircraft of that era, or even today, could accomplish. Major General Wilfried de Brouwer, Chief of Operations of the Belgian Air Staff, publicly stated that the Belgian Air Force had encountered a real phenomenon that they could not explain. When a military officer with that kind of rank and responsibility goes on record saying, "We have no idea what this was," you know something genuinely strange happened. Throughout this period, estimates suggest that over 13,500 people reported sightings, with more than 2,600 submitting detailed written statements. The descriptions were remarkably consistent. Large, dark, triangular craft, bright lights at the corners, silent or near-silent operation, slow, deliberate movement punctuated by bursts of incredible acceleration. While channeled sources don't explicitly attribute every triangular UFO sighting to the YahYel, after all, other civilizations might use similar designs, and certainly some sightings might be misidentifications of human military craft. The pattern matches what channeled material describes about YahYel scout ships and their methodology for gradual revelation. The YahYel, according to this narrative, have been conducting what you might call a soft disclosure campaign for decades. They make appearances in ways that are visible to thousands, but not undeniable to millions. They give skeptics room to explain things away while giving experiencers undeniable personal proof. They're walking a careful line between hiding and revealing, allowing humanity to acclimate gradually to a reality that will eventually become unavoidable. We are not alone. Part 7. Location in Space and Cosmic Geography. One of the more intriguing aspects of the YahYel narrative involves their location in space relative to Earth. While all of this information comes from channeled sources and remains unverifiable through conventional astronomy, it provides a fascinating glimpse into how these beings allegedly orient themselves in relation to our solar system. According to channeled material, the YahYel's home system is located in a region of space that can be referenced from Earth by using the star Cagliar-Sharshan as a navigational marker. The YahYel home is described as being 7 stars away from Cagliar-Sharshan, though the nature of this distance measurement, whether it refers to star systems along a particular trajectory, light years, or some other form of cosmic navigation, remains unclear in the available material. 7 stars from Cagliar-Sharshan. That's oddly specific, and yet also maddeningly vague. It's like someone giving you directions by saying 7 blocks from the big tree, without mentioning which direction or which big tree. What's particularly interesting is the reciprocal perspective. From the YahYel's vantage point, our solar system is located within what they call the constellation Piran. This constellation, as they perceive it, is described as having a distinctive shape, a half circle with a line extending over it. This serves as a reminder that constellations are perspective-dependent phenomena. The patterns we see from Earth are not the patterns other civilizations would see from their home worlds. Just as we organize stars into familiar shapes like Orion or Ursa Major, the YahYel have their own celestial cartography, and within that system, our Sun and its planets fall within the boundaries of Piran. So next time you look up at Orion's belt and feel all philosophical about humanity's place in the cosmos, remember that someone looking from another star system might see our Sun as part of a constellation that looks like, I don't know, a cosmic spatula or something equally mundane. Perspective matters. An additional layer of complexity involves what channeled sources describe as dimensional or frequency differences. The YahYel are said to exist at a slightly different vibrational frequency or dimensional state than humanity currently occupies. This dimensional offset means that even if we could locate their home system using conventional astronomical methods, we might not be able to directly observe it with our current technology. The stars and planets are described as being out of focus from our dimensional perspective, existing in a parallel band of reality that overlaps with but doesn't fully align with our observable 3-dimensional space. This dimensional aspect connects to the broader metaphysical framework that underlies much of the channeled material about extraterrestrial civilizations. Advanced beings are often described as existing in what's called fourth density or fifth density reality, which refers not to a different physical location, but to a different frequency band or dimensional layer of existence occupying the same general region of space. So they could be right here, technically speaking, but vibrating at a different frequency, like two radio stations broadcasting on different channels in the same city. You can't hear both simultaneously unless you have a really interesting radio. Current monitoring and visitation patterns. According to channeled sources, the YahYel maintain an active monitoring presence around Earth. They don't have a permanent base on our planet, but they visit frequently, with their ships positioned at various locations that apparently have strategic or energetic significance. One location specifically mentioned in channeled material is the northern part of South Africa. The YahYel are said to maintain a presence in this region, though whether this refers to ships hovering at high altitude, periodic visits, or some other form of monitoring, remains unspecified. South Africa has indeed had its share of UFO sightings and reports, and this region's placement in the southern hemisphere may offer unique vantage points for observing Earth's ecosystems and human activities. Another intriguing location mentioned is the area around the Nazca lines in Peru. These ancient geoglyphs, created by the Nazca culture between 500 BCE and 500 CE, have long been associated with ancient astronaut theories and UFO lore. The channeled material suggests the YahYel have a particular interest in or connection to this region. Whether this interest relates to the lines themselves, the energetic qualities of the location, or other factors remains a subject of speculation. Although, let's be honest, if you were an advanced spacefaring civilization and you discovered that an ancient human culture had drawn massive images in the desert that could only be properly seen from the air, you'd probably be curious too. It's like finding a message in a bottle, except the bottle is the entire desert, and the message is a giant monkey. That demands investigation. The DNA connection and time travel. Perhaps most intriguing is the channeled claim that YahYel DNA already exists within the human genome, and has been present since before the time of Lemuria, the legendary ancient civilization said to have existed in the Pacific Ocean thousands of years ago. According to this narrative, time-traveling YahYel visited Earth in humanity's distant past and contributed genetic material to our ancestral line. This would mean that the hybridization program isn't merely a recent development or a future possibility, but something that has already occurred in our deep past through the intervention of YahYel visitors who traveled backward through time. If accurate, this would make the YahYel not merely our cosmic cousins, but our literal genetic ancestors, with every Earth human carrying at least some degree of YahYel DNA. According to this narrative, every single person reading this right now has YahYel DNA. You're already part alien. Surprise! That might explain a few things, actually. Ever felt like you didn't quite fit in with everyone around you? Maybe it's not just social anxiety. Maybe it's because you're carrying genetic code from a civilization of peaceful, telepathic, consciousness-exploring hybrid beings. Or maybe it's both. Both is good. This temporal loop, where the YahYel, created partly from human DNA in the future, travel to the past to contribute to human development, creates a fascinating causal paradox that the channeled material doesn't fully resolve. But within the framework of multidimensional physics and parallel timelines that these sources often reference, such temporal loops may be less paradoxical than they appear from our linear time perspective. Time travel stories always get weird when you think about them too hard. Best to just nod and accept that when you're dealing with beings who can fold space-time like origami, our normal cause and effect assumptions don't necessarily apply. The assertion that every Earth human has a degree of YahYel DNA suggests a genetic kinship that transcends the hybrid program as commonly discussed. We're not merely witnessing the creation of a new hybrid race. We're participating in a cosmic family reunion where the boundaries between human and YahYel, past and future, become increasingly blurred. Multiple simultaneous lives. Adding another layer of complexity, some channeled sources indicate that certain YahYel individuals possess the capacity to live multiple lives simultaneously. This ability, apparently related to their advanced consciousness and dimensional understanding, allows a single YahYel consciousness to incarnate in multiple bodies or experiences at the same time. From our linear, single-life perspective, this seems impossible. But if consciousness is fundamentally non-local and time is more fluid than we perceive, then the ability to fragment attention across multiple simultaneous incarnations becomes a natural extension of consciousness evolution. This might explain how the YahYel can maintain such extensive monitoring and contact operations while still living their own individual lives and pursuing their own growth and development. They're literally multitasking at a cosmic level. And here we thought we were impressive for being able to walk and chew gum at the same time. My colleague, after discovering the YahYel live in multiple timelines, said I should mention a Doctor Who story by Douglas Adams called City of Death. I should whisper that my colleague is a Doctor Who fan. But my colleague's interjection seems relevant, so, in summary, in the 1979 Doctor Who story, The City of Death, an alien called Skaroth, the last of the Jaggeroth, that the main character of the show, the Doctor, encounters in Paris in 1979 is inexplicably living in multiple timelines at once, much like the YahYel. Though unlike the YahYel, this alien wishes to undo his spaceship's explosion that started life on Earth. Thankfully, the Doctor travels back in time and, with the help of regular companion Romana and temporary companion Dugan, prevents the destruction of 4 billion years of evolution that leads to humanity. The standout absurdity in this Doctor Who story is that Skaroth was friends with Leonardo da Vinci and convinced Leonardo to create multiple Mona Lisa copies in the 1500s so his other self could sell them in the 1970s at a profit. Talk about long-term planning. If you would like to get a feeling for what it might mean to live multiple lives across multiple timelines but still be connected, this story might be one way of doing that. But I digress. Part 8. Mission, Purpose, and the Transition to Unity Consciousness. Understanding the YahYel's mission requires understanding their perspective on human evolution and our current juncture as a species. According to channeled sources, humanity stands at a critical threshold. We have developed technology powerful enough to either liberate us or destroy us. We have created global communication networks that could unite us in unprecedented cooperation or amplify our divisions into catastrophic conflict. We have reached a level of population and resource use that requires either a fundamental shift in how we relate to our planet and each other, or we risk following the same path that nearly destroyed the gray civilizations, the path of imbalance, of intellect without wisdom, of power without compassion. Basically, we're at that point in the video game where you can choose the good ending or the bad ending, except this isn't a game, and there's no save file to reload if we mess it up. No pressure! The YahYel's primary mission is to serve as compassionate mentors and guides during what the channeled material calls humanity's transition into unity consciousness. But what does unity consciousness actually mean? This is a term that gets thrown around a lot in spiritual communities, so let's unpack it. Unity consciousness doesn't mean everyone thinks the same or loses their individuality. Rather, it's a shift in the fundamental understanding of self and other. In separation consciousness, where most of humanity currently operates, we experience ourselves as fundamentally separate beings in competition for limited resources. Your gain is potentially my loss. Your success might threaten mine. We build our identities in opposition to others. I am this, therefore I am not that. It's the whole us versus them mentality that has given us everything from schoolyard bullying to international warfare. Unity consciousness recognizes that while we have individual expressions and unique perspectives, we are also profoundly interconnected. The choices I make ripple through the social and ecological systems that ultimately affect you. Your well-being and my well-being are not separate concerns, but aspects of a larger collective well-being. In our globalized world, where financial systems, climate systems, and information systems all transcend national boundaries, this becomes increasingly obvious. A factory polluting a river in one country affects people downstream in another country. Economic decisions made on Wall Street impact farmers in rural India. A virus emerging anywhere can become a global pandemic within weeks. We're all on the same planet, breathing the same air, connected whether we like it or not. The YahYel, as hybrid beings who have already integrated this consciousness, want to help us make this shift not through force or manipulation, but through inspiration and example. Their role is to model what humanity could become. Beings who have balanced technology with spirituality, who have maintained connection with natural systems while achieving advanced capabilities, who have preserved diversity while establishing profound unity. According to the ET Healing Center and various channeled sources, the YahYel will likely be the first hybrid civilization to initiate open contact, though this will follow an initial broader introduction that will probably be facilitated by the Pleiadians. Why the Pleiadians first? Because they look even more human than the YahYel, and because their civilization has a longer history of indirect contact with Earth through various spiritual and mystical traditions. The Pleiadians are like the cosmic PR team, prepping humanity for the main event. The timeline that has been suggested placed official first contact with the YahYel specifically somewhere between 2025 and 2033. We are now in 2026, and more recent channeled material from Bashar indicates that official first contact may occur as early as 2027. However, we must note that this applies primarily to official governmental contact in places like the United States. Many indigenous communities worldwide have maintained sporadic contact with various alien intelligences for centuries, maintaining relationships that predate modern governmental structures. The phenomenon of first contact in the channeled material refers more specifically to undeniable, public acknowledgement, rather than the isolated encounters that have occurred throughout human history. We'll be exploring the 2027 prediction and what it might mean in another video, but for now, understand that these timelines described in channeled material are not fixed. They're described as probability windows that depend on humanity's collective consciousness and readiness. It's not a scheduled appointment in the cosmic calendar. It's more like a weather forecast. Conditions look favorable, but things could shift. The YahYel won't force contact before we're ready. They're operating from what's called respect for free will, which is described as a kind of cosmic law or principle that advanced civilizations adhere to. This means contact must emerge organically from human curiosity, openness, and invitation rather than being imposed from outside. They're not going to show up and say, "Surprise, we're taking over now," because that would violate the whole free will thing. Plus, it would probably cause mass panic, which defeats the purpose of a peaceful introduction. They're preparing us through gradual disclosure via sightings, channeled messages, and seeding the collective consciousness with ideas and possibilities. They're allowing us to acclimate, giving us time to process the implications of contact before it becomes undeniably real. Part 9. Spiritual Philosophy and Teachings. The YahYel's spiritual philosophy, as conveyed through various channeled sources, centers on several core principles that are remarkably consistent across different channels and sources. First, unity and oneness. The YahYel teach that all of existence emerges from a single source, whether you call this God, Source, the universe, consciousness, or any other name. Every being, every particle, every phenomenon is an expression of this singular creative force exploring itself through infinite diversity. Separation is an illusion, useful for creating the experience of individuality and choice, but ultimately not the deepest truth of reality. This doesn't diminish individuality. The YahYel celebrate uniqueness and individual expression, but they understand individual identity as a temporary focal point of a larger consciousness rather than as something fundamentally separate. Waves on an ocean. Each wave has its own shape, height, and character, but never actually separate from the ocean itself. You are a wave, I am a wave, we're all waves, and underneath it all, we're all the same ocean, just temporarily pretending to be separate, so we can have interesting conversations with ourselves. Second, heart-centered living. For the YahYel, the heart is not merely a physical organ, but a bridge between mind and spirit, between intellectual understanding and intuitive knowing. They teach that the heart operates at a frequency of coherence and resonance that can connect us to deeper truths than intellect alone can access. Heart-centered living means making choices based not only on logical analysis, but on what resonates, on what feels aligned, on what generates states of joy, love, creativity, and peace. It means listening to the wisdom of emotions rather than suppressing them or being controlled by them. It means recognizing that feelings are information, that resonance and dissonance are guidance systems helping us navigate toward our highest expression. Humans have a tendency to overthink everything. We get stuck in our heads, analyzing, worrying, planning, second-guessing. The YahYel are essentially suggesting we occasionally let the heart take the wheel. Not abandon reason entirely, mind you, but balance it with feeling. Your heart often knows things your brain hasn't figured out yet. That's not mystical nonsense. That's the heart's electromagnetic field being 50 times stronger than the brain's, creating its own form of perception and knowing. Third, authenticity and self-truth. The YahYel emphasize the importance of honoring your own path, your own truth, your own expression. They don't present themselves as having all the answers or as superior beings we should worship or blindly follow. Instead, they position themselves as older siblings, fellow travelers who have walked a path before us and can share what they've learned. They teach that every being carries a unique spark of the universal creative energy, and that true growth comes from an inward journey of self-discovery rather than from external authority. Your purpose isn't assigned to you from outside, but something you discover by following what excites you, what calls to you, what makes you feel most alive. Which is refreshing, honestly. How many spiritual or religious systems have told humanity, here's what you must do, here's who you must be, follow these rules or else. The YahYel are apparently saying, figure out who you really are and do that. That's some genuinely liberating theology right there. Fourth, frequency and vibration. This is where YahYel philosophy intersects with what you might call quantum or energetic understandings of reality. They teach that everything exists as frequency and vibration, that what we call matter is actually energy vibrating at specific rates, and that consciousness itself is a form of vibration. Like frequencies attract and amplify each other. This is the principle behind what some call the law of attraction or manifestation. When you maintain frequencies of love, joy, appreciation, and curiosity, you naturally attract experiences, people, and opportunities that resonate with those frequencies. Conversely, when you operate from fear, anger, resentment, or scarcity, you attract experiences that match those lower frequency states. Now, before anyone gets too carried away with this, it doesn't mean you can just think positive thoughts and magically manifest $1 million. Reality is more nuanced than that. But there is something to the idea that your general state of being, your emotional baseline, influences what you notice, what opportunities you pursue, and how other people respond to you. Someone operating from chronic fear and scarcity is going to make very different choices than someone operating from trust and abundance. And those choices will lead to very different life trajectories. The YahYel themselves are described as vibrating at a higher frequency than most humans, which is part of why being in their presence is reported to feel uplifting, peaceful, and energizing. They've learned to sustain higher frequency states more consistently, and their very presence can help raise the frequency of those around them through a kind of resonance or entrainment effect. Like tuning forks. If you strike a tuning fork and hold it near another tuning fork of the same frequency, the second one will start to vibrate sympathetically. Consciousness apparently works similarly. Fifth, the power of conscious creation. The YahYel teach that we are not passive victims of circumstances, but active creators of our reality through the focus of our consciousness, our beliefs, and our emotional states. This doesn't mean we can wish anything into existence instantly, or that we're responsible for every bad thing that happens, but it does mean we have far more creative power than most humans currently recognize or utilize. They emphasize that reality is far more malleable and responsive to consciousness than our materialist paradigm suggests. The future is not fixed, but exists as a field of probabilities that consciousness collapses into specific experiences through the choices we make, the attention we give, and the frequencies we embody. Quantum physics actually supports this idea to some degree. The observer effect, wave-particle duality, the measurement problem, all of these point to consciousness playing a fundamental role in determining reality rather than just passively observing it. The YahYel have apparently taken this understanding and developed it into a practical technology of consciousness. We are still arguing about whether the tree makes a sound when it falls with nobody around to hear it. They've moved on to consciously designing which trees grow where. Part 10. Communication, contact, and the telepathic signature. One of the most fascinating aspects of the YahYel material is how they describe communication and the process of making contact with them. According to channeled sources, communication with the YahYel is not primarily verbal, but energetic and telepathic. While they can certainly understand and even speak human languages when needed, their natural mode of communication operates at a deeper level than words. Words can convey information, but they're also limited by language, by the specific associations and meanings we attach to sounds and symbols. Telepathic or energetic communication, by contrast, conveys not only ideas, but the emotional context, the imagery, the sensory associations, and the deeper understanding all simultaneously. Rather than describing an experience, you share it directly. It's the difference between telling someone about a sunset and actually showing them one. Words are useful, but they're always approximations. Telepathy is apparently the full resolution version. The YahYel telepathic signature. For humans who want to initiate contact with the YahYel, there exists what might be thought of as a telepathic phone number or frequency signature. This signature functions as a way to tune your consciousness to the specific frequency band where the YahYel can be reached. The YahYel signature is visual and consists of a specific symbol. A black background, a white pentagon, a five-sided geometric shape, a single green dot in the center of the pentagon. To use this signature for contact, the practice involves holding a clear mental image of this symbol during meditation or focused intention. The geometric form, pentagon, combined with the specific color arrangement, white on black with green central point, apparently creates a resonance pattern that the YahYel can detect and respond to. The pentagon shape has symbolic significance in various mystical traditions, often associated with the human form. 5 points: head, 2 arms, 2 legs, and the 5 elements. The green central dot might represent the heart center, growth, nature, or the life force. Black represents the void or infinite potential, while white represents light and clarity. When you visualize this symbol clearly and hold it in your mind's eye while maintaining an open, receptive state, you're essentially broadcasting a signal on a frequency the YahYel monitor. This doesn't guarantee immediate contact. Timing depends on many factors, including your readiness, their availability, and broader cosmic considerations. but it establishes an invitation and a channel for communication. Think of it like this. The YahYel have essentially published their phone number, not in the yellow pages, obviously, but in the vibrational directory of the cosmos. You just need to dial correctly. And unlike most phone numbers, you don't dial with your fingers, but with your consciousness. Much more elegant than pressing buttons, though admittedly harder to do while driving. Practical contact approaches. For humans who want to initiate contact with the YahYel, channeled sources emphasize several approaches: intention and invitation. The first step is simply setting a clear intention and issuing a genuine invitation. The YahYel respect free will absolutely, which means they wait for invitation rather than imposing contact. Expressing sincere interest and openness, either aloud or in meditation, creates an energetic opening that they can respond to. You can literally just say, out loud or in your mind, "YahYel, if you're out there, I'm open to contact. I'd like to learn from you and understand more about our cosmic family." That's it. That's the whole technique. No complicated rituals, no special incantations, no need to sacrifice a chicken or draw circles on the floor, just honest intention. Refreshingly straightforward for something so potentially reality-altering. Frequency alignment. The YahYel exist at a higher frequency than most humans currently maintain. To make contact, we need to raise our own frequency to create a bridge. You raise your frequency through practices and states that generate coherent, high-vibration emotions. Meditation, time in nature, creative expression, acts of kindness, states of gratitude, moments of joy and wonder. Being perfect or transcending all negative emotions isn't the goal. Rather, cultivating more sustained time in these higher states creates the conditions for contact. Some people report that immediately after watching a sunset, or while playing music or during deep meditation, they've had sudden intuitive hits, visions, or what felt like telepathic contact. So if you're someone who's been doing inner work, meditation, consciousness exploration, and you occasionally have weird experiences or sudden downloads of information that seem to come from nowhere, well, maybe they're not coming from nowhere. Maybe you've been accidentally calling the YahYel this whole time without realizing it. Heart-centered awareness. Multiple channeled sources emphasize moving awareness from the head to the heart. This is partly about getting out of analytical, judgmental thinking and into receptive, open awareness. There's a practice sometimes called heart breathing, where you focus your attention on your heart center. Breathe slowly and deeply, and imagine breathing directly through your heart. This practice is said to help create the coherent heart state that facilitates contact. Dream contact. Many people report that their first contact experiences with the YahYel occur in dreams, or in that hypnagogic state between waking and sleeping. This makes sense because in these states, the analytical mind is less active and consciousness is more fluid and receptive. Some people who have worked consistently with setting intentions before sleep report eventually having what feel like genuine interactive experiences with YahYel representatives. So if you start having vivid dreams about triangular ships or beautiful beings with large eyes who teach you things, don't immediately assume you ate too much cheese before bed. Write them down. Pay attention. Dreams might be where the cosmic phone line is clearest. Physical sightings. Some people who have worked with these practices report eventually having physical sightings of triangular craft or even close encounters. These experiences are described as happening when the person is in a particularly high-frequency state and when the timing aligns with factors we may not fully understand. Importantly, the YahYel emphasize that contact should feel joyful, expansive, and loving. Real YahYel contact should feel like coming home, like meeting family you didn't know you had, like a reunion. If it doesn't feel that way, something's off, and you should probably take a step back and reassess. Part 11. Diet, Daily Life, and Cultural Practices. One of the challenges in understanding the YahYel is that channeled information about their day-to-day life and culture is somewhat limited compared to information about their mission and spiritual teachings. However, we can piece together some interesting details from various sources. Regarding diet, the channeled material offers more speculation than concrete detail, but there are some consistent themes. Given the YahYel's deep connection to natural principles and their emphasis on maintaining high vibratory states, sources suggest their nourishment is probably primarily plant-based or perhaps even partially energy-based. In more advanced civilizations, according to this cosmology, physical bodies become less dense and require less dense food. The YahYel might cultivate specific plants aboard their ships that are grown in highly conscious, intentional ways that maximize their energetic and nutritional properties. Some sources speculate about practices similar to what's called breatharianism or pranic nourishment, where beings can derive sustenance directly from energy fields, though the YahYel haven't apparently evolved to the point where they've transcended physical nourishment entirely. What's particularly interesting is that Bashar has briefly discussed the YahYel's physiological efficiency, specifically regarding how they process bodily waste. According to this information, the YahYel's bodies are extraordinarily efficient in their metabolic processes. What minimal waste their bodies produce is eliminated through an elegant system involving tiny hair-like structures on their skin. This process is somewhat analogous to how minor waste products in human blood are eliminated through our pores, or how sometimes the human body will expel cellular waste through what becomes a tiny skin blemish, something that might appear mole-like before eventually falling away. However, the YahYel's system is far more refined and continuous. The tiny hairs on their skin apparently function as micro-elimination channels, constantly and imperceptibly releasing the minute amounts of waste their highly efficient metabolism produces. This means they don't require the elaborate digestive and elimination systems that humans have. There are no bathrooms on YahYel ships in the way we would understand them. The waste elimination happens continuously, invisibly, at the cellular level through the skin, which is kept pristinely clean through processes we might compare to how our own skin naturally exfoliates and renews itself, but far more efficiently. So, no toilets, which means no plumbing problems, no awkward moments running into your coworker in the bathroom, no need to stock toilet paper. From a practical standpoint, that's actually pretty genius. Although it does raise questions about what they think when they visit Earth and see our elaborate sewage systems. They probably find our whole bathroom culture as baffling as we find their lack of one. This detail, while seemingly mundane, actually reveals something profound about their evolutionary trajectory. They've optimized their biological systems to the point where even the basic functions of metabolism and waste elimination have been streamlined into elegant, continuous processes that don't interrupt daily life or require dedicated attention and facilities. The YahYel, while recognizably humanoid, operate according to biological principles that have been refined far beyond our current human design. Regarding hobbies and recreation, again, the material is somewhat sparse, but there are interesting hints. The YahYel are described as being deeply creative, artistic, and playful. They apparently create music, visual arts, and participatory experiences that human language struggles to describe, because these works involve multi-sensory experiences and energy manipulation in ways we don't have equivalents for. Yalana, channeled through Syl Goodhart, specifically mentions that the YahYel love to play. This playfulness isn't frivolous, but is actually a form of high spiritual practice. Play creates joy, spontaneity, presence, and connection, all high-frequency states. The YahYel apparently understand that play, creativity, and joy aren't things you earn after you've done the real work. They are the real work of consciousness evolution, which is pretty much the opposite of how most human societies are structured. We work hard, so we can maybe have some leisure time, if we're lucky, and haven't collapsed from exhaustion first. The YahYel have apparently figured out that life itself should be playful, creative, and joyful. Work and play aren't separate categories. Everything is approached with a spirit of curiosity and delight. Revolutionary concept. Maybe that's what we need to learn from them most of all. Community gathering and collective experiences are apparently central to YahYel culture. They're described as doing things together not out of obligation, but out of genuine desire for connection and shared experience. Imagine a culture where work and play aren't divided, where contributing to collective needs is inherently enjoyable, where what serves you also serves the whole, where nobody's dragging themselves to a job they hate to pay for things they don't need to impress people they don't like. That's apparently the YahYel reality. Human YahYel hybrids. According to channeled sources, there exists a designation for individuals who are hybrids of human and YahYel genetics. The term Yawane is used to describe such human YahYel hybrids. While limited information is available about Yawane individuals specifically, their existence suggests that the hybridization program may include not only the 5 major hybrid races, but also individual cases of mixed heritage, perhaps including some who live among human populations, or who serve as special ambassadors between the two civilizations. So if you ever meet someone who seems to understand technology intuitively, is inexplicably good at meditation, radiates a peaceful energy that makes everyone around them feel calm, and who looks at our complex bureaucratic systems with genuine confusion about why we make things so complicated, well, you might be talking to a Yawane, or they might just be a really chill person. Either way, probably worth getting to know them. Part 12. Technology and Advanced Capabilities. According to channeled sessions, particularly those with Jonathan Trinity Martin channeling Tahinio Ra of the YahYel, these beings possess technologies that would seem like magic or miracles to us, but which they understand as natural extensions of consciousness, interfacing with the fundamental nature of reality. Anti-gravity propulsion. YahYel craft apparently utilize what we would call anti-gravity technology. though from their perspective they've learned to work with gravitational fields as a form of energy that can be modulated and directed. Their triangular scout ships can hover motionless, accelerate to enormous speeds instantly, make sharp turns that would destroy any pilot experiencing normal physics, all because they're not fighting gravity, but working with it in ways our physics is only beginning to theorize about. We're over here using controlled explosions to push metal tubes through the atmosphere, while they're surfing gravitational waves like it's nothing. It's the difference between using a horse and buggy and driving a Tesla. Actually, scratch that. It's the difference between using a horse and buggy and teleporting. We're not even in the same technological ballpark. We're not even playing the same sport. Instantaneous travel. Beyond faster-than-light travel, the YahYel are said to possess technology that allows for essentially instantaneous movement between locations through what might be understood as wormholes, dimensional shifts, or working with space-time in ways that transcend our linear understanding. They apparently don't experience travel as going from point A to point B through space, but as shifting between states of being here and being there. Imagine never having to deal with traffic, or airport security, or sitting in a cramped airplane seat for hours. You just decide where you want to be, and you're there. No jet lag, no lost luggage, no terrible airplane food. The YahYel have essentially solved every transportation problem humans have ever had. Consciousness. Interactive technology. Perhaps the most fascinating claim is that YahYel technology interfaces directly with consciousness. Their ships apparently respond to thought and intention. Their systems are navigated not through physical controls, but through conscious direction. The line between operator and technology becomes blurred because the technology is designed to function as an extension of consciousness rather than as a separate tool consciousness must manipulate. This makes sense when you understand their philosophy that consciousness is primary and matter is secondary, that matter is essentially consciousness expressing itself in a particular form. From this perspective, technology isn't about manipulating dead matter, but about consciousness, interfacing with other forms of consciousness in cooperative relationships. We're still poking at touchscreens with our fingers like cavemen discovering fire. They're literally thinking at their technology, and it responds. No keyboards, no mice, no fighting with autocorrect. Just pure intention translated directly into action. That's either incredibly advanced or incredibly terrifying, depending on how disciplined your thoughts are. Energy generation. The YahYel reportedly have access to what we might call free energy, or zero-point energy, ways of accessing the fundamental energy field that permeates space to power their civilization without burning fuel, creating waste, or depleting resources. This technology is apparently clean, limitless, and based on principles that our physics recognizes theoretically, but hasn't successfully harnessed practically. Meanwhile, we're still burning ancient dead plants and fighting wars over who gets to control the supply. We know there's energy everywhere in the quantum vacuum, in the fabric of space itself, but we can't figure out how to tap into it. The YahYel have apparently solved this problem completely. No electric bills, no gas stations, no arguing about who left the lights on. Just infinite clean energy from the structure of space itself. Healing technologies. YahYel healing apparently works primarily through frequency and consciousness rather than through drugs or surgery. They have technologies that can scan the energetic field of an organism, identify where frequencies are incoherent or disharmonious, and restore coherence through various means, including light, sound, and direct energetic transmission. The implications of these technologies for humanity are staggering. If even a fraction of what's described is possible, open contact and technology transfer could transform human civilization within a generation. Solving energy crises, ending pollution, revolutionizing medicine, enabling space travel, and fundamentally reshaping how we relate to our planet and to each other. This is part of why the YahYel and other groups are said to be moving carefully with contact. Such technologies in the hands of a still divided, still conflict-prone humanity could be dangerous. The technology must come with the consciousness shift, not before it. You don't give a toddler a chainsaw, no matter how much they promise to be careful. Similarly, you don't give a species that still hasn't figured out how to stop fighting over resources access to technology that could either save or destroy their world. The YahYel are apparently waiting for us to mature a bit first. Part 13. The Galactic Context and Wider Community. The YahYel don't exist in isolation. They're described as being part of a much larger galactic community of civilizations at various stages of development, all interconnected through what's sometimes called the Galactic Federation, the Interstellar Alliance, or simply the Galactic Community. Understanding this context is crucial because the YahYel's role as first contact ambassadors is specifically about bridging humanity into this wider community. They're the introduction, the friendly faces, the ones who will help us understand that we're not isolated on our little blue planet, but are part of a vast cosmic ecology of conscious beings. According to the channeled material, this galactic community operates according to certain principles and laws, including the law of free will. Advanced civilizations don't interfere with the development of less advanced civilizations without invitation. This is why open contact hasn't already happened. Humanity hasn't collectively reached a point of readiness and invitation. We have to ask for the help. They won't force it on us. The law of attraction. Like frequencies attract, civilizations that have evolved to peaceful cooperative models attract contact with similar civilizations. Warlike, destructive civilizations attract different kinds of visitors. So if we want contact with the nice aliens instead of the scary ones, we need to get our act together as a species. The prime directive of non-interference. Similar to what Star Trek fans will recognize, there's a general principle that developing civilizations should be allowed to evolve at their own pace without intervention that would fundamentally disrupt their natural development. Gene Roddenberry apparently got that one right. Within this community, different civilizations apparently specialize in different areas and play different roles. The Pleiadians are known for energetic healing, artistic expression, and diplomatic mediation. The Arcturians are described as ancient masters of consciousness and energy work. The Syrians are portrayed as technologically brilliant and deeply spiritual. The Essassani specialize in teaching about synchronicity and the mechanics of reality creation. And the YahYel? They specialize in bridge building, in making contact with emerging civilizations, in helping species transition from isolated planetary consciousness to cosmic consciousness. This is their gift, their expertise, Their joy. They're the cosmic welcoming committee, the ones who show up to help the new kids find their way around the galactic neighborhood. The Galactic Federation is sometimes described as monitoring Earth closely during this transition period, because our choices in the coming decades will have implications not only for humanity, but for the larger galactic community. We're developing technologies, artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, quantum computing that could take us in very different directions. A humanity that awakens to unity consciousness and joins the galactic community cooperatively would be a wonderful addition. A humanity that remains in separation consciousness while wielding advanced technology would be a potential threat. So there's that. No pressure, but apparently the entire galactic community is watching us to see if we're going to make it or blow ourselves up. It's like the whole universe is watching humanity's reality show, waiting to see if this season ends with enlightenment or apocalypse. Let's hope we get renewed for another season. Part 14. Preparing for Contact. As we move toward the conclusion of this exploration, let's discuss the practical implications. What does it mean to prepare for potential first contact, whether that happens in 2027, as recent channeling suggests, or in the years beyond? According to the YahYel's teachings and the broader contact-oriented community, preparation isn't about building bunkers or learning alien languages, but about inner work, consciousness expansion, and creating conditions that make contact possible and beneficial. Personal preparation. At the individual level, preparing for contact means developing inner peace and stability, so you're not reactive or fear-based. If you meet a YahYel and immediately panic, that's not going to be a productive interaction for anyone involved. Cultivating openness and curiosity while maintaining discernment. Be open to new possibilities, but don't believe everything you hear or see. Critical thinking and wonder can coexist. Working with your own belief systems and programming about what's possible. If your mind is locked into the idea that aliens can't exist, you're going to have a hard time when they show up. Raising your vibrational frequency through practices that generate joy, creativity, love, and wonder. Be the kind of person who makes first contact more likely by being someone they'd actually want to talk to. Developing telepathic sensitivity through meditation and intuitive practices. Start paying attention to your intuition, your hunches, those quiet inner knowings that might be more than just random thoughts. Healing trauma and clearing emotional baggage that keeps you locked in survival mode. Do your inner work. Go to therapy. Process your stuff. Healed humans make better ambassadors. Questioning consensus reality while staying grounded and functional. You can entertain wild cosmic possibilities while still paying your bills and being a responsible adult. Both things can be true. Collective preparation. At the societal level, we see various signs that preparation is occurring. Increasing mainstream acceptance of the reality of UFOs and UAPs. The government is admitting they exist. Government disclosure processes in multiple countries. Information is slowly being released that would have been laughed at 20 years ago. Growing scientific interest in the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. SETI is going strong, and new projects are launching all the time. Cultural products, movies, shows, books that explore contact scenarios. We're culturally rehearsing what contact might be like. Spiritual and consciousness communities growing and connecting globally. More people are doing inner work and expanding their awareness than ever before. Increasing awareness of ecological crisis demanding new ways of relating to Earth. We're being forced to evolve or die. That tends to focus the mind. The YahYel and other groups are allegedly working behind the scenes to support this collective preparation, influencing events, inspiring individuals, and helping to shift the collective field of consciousness toward openness. They're not doing it for us, but they're helping us do it for ourselves. Creating contact communities. Some people are forming intentional communities and groups specifically focused on preparing for and facilitating contact. These groups meet regularly to meditate together, work on raising collective frequency, practice protocols for potential contact scenarios, and create networks of people who won't panic or become hostile if contact occurs. The idea is that when official contact does occur, having communities of prepared individuals who can serve as ambassadors, translators, and educators will help the broader population process and adapt to this reality shift. Somebody's got to be the calm one explaining to everyone else that it's okay, they're friendly, please put down the weapons. Conclusion. Living in the mystery. We've covered a tremendous amount of territory in this exploration. The YahYel's origins as a hybrid race created from human and gray genetics, their role as the fifth and most human-like of the hybrid races, their anticipated position as humanity's first official contact with an extraterrestrial civilization, their physical appearance and energetic presence, their location in space relative to Earth, and their cosmic geography, their spacecraft technology, including the triangular scout ships connected to mass sightings like the Phoenix Lights and Belgian UFO wave, their mission to guide humanity toward unity consciousness, their spiritual philosophy emphasizing heart-centered living, oneness, and conscious creation, the telepathic signature that can be used to initiate contact, their advanced technologies and capabilities, and their place within a larger galactic community. But we must return to a crucial question. What do we do with information like this? If you approach this material as literal truth, as factual descriptions of real beings who will soon make themselves known, then the implications are world-changing. We're potentially on the verge of the most significant event in human history, the end of our isolation in the cosmos and our introduction into a galactic community. Your children or grandchildren may live in a world where traveling to other star systems is normal, where human civilization has transformed through consciousness shifts and technology transfers beyond our current imagination. If you approach this material as mythology, as a kind of modern creation myth that expresses deep human longings for connection, meaning, and transcendence, then it remains valuable. The teachings about unity consciousness, heart-centered living, frequency and vibration, conscious creation, these have practical value regardless of whether the YahYel are literally real. They offer a framework for living more consciously, more compassionately, more expansively. If you approach this material with healthy skepticism, as unverified claims requiring extraordinary evidence, then you're in good company with the scientific method and rational inquiry. The burden of proof for claims about extraterrestrial contact is appropriately high. But skepticism doesn't require cynicism. Remaining open to possibilities while insisting on evidence before accepting claims as facts is entirely possible. You can be a skeptic and still look up at the stars with wonder. We don't know. That's the honest truth. We have channeled testimony from multiple sources telling remarkably consistent stories. We have mass UFO sightings that remain unexplained despite official investigations. We have thousands of people reporting contact experiences. We have ancient myths and modern narratives that seem to point toward the same conclusion. We are not alone. We are being visited, and we may be on the verge of a great awakening. But we don't have the kind of undeniable, reproducible, scientific proof that would settle these questions definitively. And maybe that's by design. Maybe the YahYel and other groups maintain this level of plausible deniability specifically to give people freedom to choose their beliefs, to give humanity time to prepare, without forcing a reality shift on those who aren't ready. Maybe the ambiguity is intentional. Maybe it serves a purpose we don't fully understand yet. What I encourage you to do: hold the material lightly. Don't cling to it as absolute truth, but don't dismiss it without consideration either. Sit with it. See what resonates with your own experience and intuition. Let it be a possibility rather than a certainty or an impossibility. Extract the wisdom. Whether the YahYel are literally real or not, the teachings attributed to them contain valuable insights about consciousness, community, and living in alignment with natural principles. Use what's useful. Leave what isn't. Do your own research. Look into the mass sightings, the government disclosures, the scientific studies. Form your own opinions based on examining evidence, rather than accepting either believers or skeptics at face value. Think for yourself. That's always good advice, regardless of the topic. Stay open and grounded. Radical openness to possibility combined with practical groundedness in daily life. Don't become so focused on potential contact that you neglect the responsibilities and relationships of your actual life. But don't become so cynical that you close yourself off to wonder and possibility. Walk the middle path. Practice the principles. Whether there are YahYel in triangular ships watching over Earth or not, you can practice heart-centered living. You can work on raising your frequency. You can cultivate unity consciousness in your relationships and communities. These practices have value regardless of the cosmic context. They make your life better either way. And perhaps most importantly, live as though we are part of a cosmic community. Even if official contact never happens in your lifetime, living with the awareness that we might be connected to a larger family of conscious beings throughout the universe can transform how you relate to yourself, to other humans, to Earth, and to existence itself. The YahYel narrative, whether literal or mythological, invites us into a bigger story, one where humanity's struggles and triumphs matter not only to us, but to a watching cosmos, where our choices about how we evolve will ripple out beyond our solar system, where we're not cosmic orphans but cosmic children taking our first steps toward joining a family we didn't know we had. That story, regardless of its literal truth, has the power to inspire, to elevate, and to transform. And in a world that often feels fragmented, meaningless, and hopeless, perhaps that's exactly the story we need. Perhaps believing we're part of something larger, something meaningful, something beautiful, is exactly what will help us become worthy of joining that larger community. Perhaps the belief itself is part of what makes the reality possible, Thank you for joining me on this deep dive into the phenomenon of the YahYel. Whether you walk away from this as a believer, a skeptic, or someone simply enriched by having encountered new ideas, I hope this exploration has expanded your sense of what might be possible, what might be true, and what kind of universe we might actually be living in. Keep looking up. Keep staying curious. Keep your heart open and your mind engaged. And who knows, maybe one night you'll look up and see a triangular formation of lights slowly drifting across the sky, and you'll know in that moment that the universe is far stranger, far more wondrous, and far more alive than you ever imagined. The YahYel may be waiting for us to be ready. The question remains, are we? And if we're not ready yet, what would it take to get there? What would it take for humanity to collectively say, yes, we're ready to meet our cosmic family? Maybe it starts with you. Maybe it starts with each of us choosing to live a little more openly, a little more lovingly, a little more consciously. Maybe first contact doesn't happen to us. Maybe we create it through becoming the kind of species that's ready for it. Something to think about next time you're looking up at the stars on a clear night. Maybe someone's looking back. Maybe they're waiting. Maybe they've been waiting a long time. Maybe it's almost time. Until next time, stay curious, stay open, and remember, we're all cosmic beings having a human experience.